series. And thank you to our online viewers for tuning in today. And remember, you can tweet in your questions during our Q&A session to @Palestine Center on Twitter. Today's panel will feature two local Arab art experts, Ms. Ikram Lakhdhar and Ms. Manal Diab, for a discussion about art, resistance, and exile. Drawing on knowledge from personal experience as well as research, the two panelists will offer insight into the importance of art for people of all nationalities, especially Palestinians, for whom art is a link to a lost homeland and a historical narrative that will not be erased. So without further ado, I'll welcome Ms. Manal Diab, our first speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jerusalem Fund. Thank you, Jerusalem Fund, for inviting me to share my experience with you today. I'm honored and pleased to be here. Let me introduce myself. Again, my name is Manal Diab. I'm Palestinian American. I was born in Ramallah, and I came to the United States back in 1986. I studied fine arts when I first came to the States. I studied fine arts with concentration in painting at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And about 5 years ago, I got a degree in individualized studies with concentration in psychology of art. As you can see, how do you get to this? On the first slide, if you can help me with this, I'm sorry. Until we get to the slide, as you can see, my artwork I will be sharing with you today is an attempt to find self and identity. I have an uncontrollable urge to paint portraits driven by the desire to capture the human spirit, parts which I insist that cannot be reached through any other medium. Using self-portrait, I'm always searching for who I am at this point of my life and my place in the world, an existential journey in exile. I duplicate self-portrait of my own dreams and memories, sometimes running the risk of reinventing my own self by asserting a new identity or reclaiming an old one. I call my artwork Anxiety in Exile, with its agonizing sense of freedom. Yet, I'm consciously celebrating my Palestinian heritage in every piece of my artwork. I use Arabic calligraphy, verses from the Quran, old pieces of wood, sometimes old pieces from a Palestinian custom, to give a different effect to my artwork. Several examples I will be showing today, accompanied by poems. I was inspired by poetry while the make of my artwork. The poems is by a poet named Iyad Hayatle. He's a friend, a Palestinian friend who lives in Scotland. I believe in the political power of arts, of ideas and emotions. I think all art forms are types of emotional forces, so powerful tools for communication. They are better tools than political and military solutions. I'm going to give you an example, a real-life example that I had. On the observance of the International Day of Solidarity with Palestinian People back in November 29 of 2012, I had most of my artwork exhibited at the United Nations Visitor Center in the city of New York. There I had viewers from all over the world. Interesting and shocking to me at that exhibit that some of the viewers read negatively in my artwork. They, in their articles and response to my artwork, they say that there are hidden logos in my art that has to do with political issues between Palestinians and Israelis, where I have no intention or whatsoever of having these logos, but I guess that's what they want to see. Others were very happy to see my artwork. I had my, in one of my art pieces, I had my grandmother headpiece that shows that I am Palestinian. And I guess either way, if my artwork created the anxiety and questioning in some, and created happiness and comfort in others, I guess I have been successful in my artwork. In some cases, the artwork has revealed or enforced the Palestinian consciousness in the Arab viewers in exile. In other cases, the artwork challenged viewers who were against the Palestinian rights. Several reviews and articles were written based on both perceptions and my work. As you can see in this slide, that my artwork I will be sharing with you today is about my memories, advancing of years, dreams, identity, the identity of a Palestinian artist living in exile. They say home is where your heart is. I say home is where your art is. This is a photograph, homeless. I believe photography as a medium has its own peculiarities of its own, instant and credible. Here it's originally black and white photograph. I manipulated the negative and selected a texture red-toned paper on which to print on, so that the image had the look and the feel of painting or etchings. Again, the subject matter is exile. I call it internal exile here. Arabic calligraphy covering the form of the female figure, confirming the Palestinian or the Arab identity, to be precise. Red color to depict the feel of insecure and danger. All artwork I will be sharing with you from now on is going to be mixed media, acrylic paint on canvas. And the concept behind my work will be structure. Structure can be defined, vision and expression, and structure may be determined by paint strokes, pattern, like and design, tightly controlled space and concept. Let me start by the first. In April of 2012, I had a solo exhibit here at Jerusalem Fund Gallery. I was honored to have my artwork shown in the Jerusalem Fund Gallery. All work exhibited were accompanied by poetry by Iyad Hayatle, the Palestinian friend whom I talked to you about at the beginning. If you had the chance to read the poetry here, Iyad and I kept both memories and hope very much alive. His longing, or haneen in Arabic, for homeland is obvious. Here he is saying, leaving his soul behind and his memories. But to me, memories are partially showing, partially hiding. There are wings of hopes and calligraphy appearing from under the white paint, like peeling posters from the walls to convey time and the passing of time and the longing for home. On a side note, This piece has been selected by the curators of Muslima Art Gallery at the International Museum of Women based in San Francisco, and many positive views were posted on this piece. Again, this is a mixed media acrylic paint on canvas. And I would like to share with you now a section from an article I read published by the Middle East Institute. The title of the article is Visions of Return, the Palestine Arab Refugee in Arabic Poetry by an author named Tibawi. It says, a great and increasing mass of literature, chiefly poetry, and also drama, song, and painting has been steadily appearing in the Arab world for the past years. Its theme is the Palestine Arab refugee, his sense of injustice, and his longing for return to his homeland. All poets, singers, writers, and artists are Palestinian with first-hand experience with the calamity of their people and as human beings. Again, this is obvious in Iyad's poetry if you read it. We shall return, the hope to return. To me, layers of paint, struggle, eyes peeking through from under the white paint, shadowy glimpses of the faces of refugees, and Jerusalem golden dome of the rock. A story I am telling of my people's struggle and pain. This is the piece I was talking about with my grandmother's headpiece. It's a mixed media, acrylic paint on canvas, my gorgeous Palestine. Here I used my grandmother headpiece to confirm my identity as a Palestinian and to preserve my heritage. To Iyad, Palestine is his mother's tears and the scent of Arabic coffee. It is important not to underestimate these emotions concerning the return. Palestinian adults, men and women with their children who are homeless but also children of refugees born in exile, aspiration and emotions will translate into achievements and action. They may still be vague concerning means, but there is no doubt about the intentions. Do you agree with me? I hope so. We are only physically here. In spirit, we are in our homeland. Home is with us every day and every hour and fills our heart and soul. All what I just explained is obvious in this section of poetry by Iyad, and the anguish of longing for home in this painting to me is a dreamlike vortex of swirling movement, striking black, splitting the painting in half to give the feel of the night that Iyad is talking about in his poetry. Yet there is hope lingering around with words and written in Arabic. Shadows from under the paint again, peeking through like something that it's hidden, but it's there. So strong, an eye or someone smiling from under the white paint. It's like a recollection of hazy memory. This is a self-portrait. As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, I have this urge to make self-portraits over and over, and this is one of my favorite self-portraits. Part dream, part memory, part mourning, part longing. In this self-portrait, I offer my face. I offer my face without my eyes, without the window to my soul. Yet, there is a smile on my lips, thinking that my Palestinian identity will emerge unfragmented into light someday. I am from there, and there is mine. I would like to read this section of poetry with you, if you don't mind. There, far away, where the sky just a bow's length from a sigh, overshadows the roofs of houses born out of tents, as it dries the tears of old women which remain on their eyelashes. Wherever they dwell, wherever they go, there, far away. And finally, the obvious fact that the yearning of the Palestine Arab is not essentially material, nor perhaps primarily political. It is above all a deep spiritual aspiration in the soul of every Palestinian Arab in exile, whether a refugee tent or in a more comfortable situation. Poets and artists, apart from being refugees themselves, they act as channels for voicing the grievances and hopes of the mass of the refugee. An adult refugee of the older generation may be inarticulate, but cherishes the hope of return all the same in the few words he musters to describe the injustice of the past and the aspiration of the future. A young refugee is on the whole well-informed, vocal, bitter, and more determined to return to his native land. The feelings, dreams, emotions, and aspirations are thus communal, shared by old and young alike. This concludes my presentation, and I will leave you with a section on the slides from an interview I had and I talked about at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Aslama, hello everyone. I'm very honored to be here today, especially I can see a lot of Palestinians here. And as a Tunisian, I share a lot of what's happening there. A lot of it is happening in my own country, and so what Manal spoke about is very close to my heart as well. My presentation will be more about theoretical art historical concepts that talk about art and politics and their relationship. As a young curator, I organized an exhibition, so I will show some works from that exhibition and speak about some artworks. So first of all, since the early emergence of key art historical concepts, such as political art, propaganda art, art of the revolution, art of the war, art of protest, resistance art, and street art, the popular perspective has been concerned with describing this kind of art as either an artistic reaction to political turmoil or as an artistic action for social change. However, both of these definitions position art as inferior in the hierarchy of power of authority, especially when the contemporary artistic production is pegged to the high demand for kitsch and ornamental decorative art. Moreover, when artists start making explicit criticism of a certain political regime or leader, they are censored, persecuted, exiled, or driven to the margins of society based on the premise that their actions are serious threats to the national interest of society. In consequence, the art exposed, consumed, and celebrated by the public usually is inherently unfree. Karl Marx contributed tremendously to the development of art theory. In his anthology, he declared the end of art as a phenomenon that shaped the relation of art to the society. He claimed that art has become the byproduct of the economic and political infrastructure of the society and not in any way involved in the making of it. He says, the essential quality of art appears to be sacrificed to its religious function, which in turn is nothing but a means for kings and priests to maintain authority over their people. The young Marx must have thought that such a relationship contradicts the basic definition of art, which for him meant the undistorted revelation of true human nature. On the other hand, another scholar I researched, his name is Jacques Rancière, he characterized genuine politics and artistic activities as separate realities. In his book, The Census, it involves forms of innovation that tear bodies from their assigned places and free speech and expression from all reduction to functionality. Delineating how freedom is configured according to art and to politics is essential in understanding how art and politics relate to each other. To that, Kant confirms that once people grow more accustomed to thinking for themselves, even governments will respond to the propensity and calling to think freely. Essentially, art alongside with politics are defining actors in the regulation of human existence, but most importantly, art acts as the source of knowledge about human nature, while politics defines the appropriate knowledge. The narrative of progress of developing states in the global order, such as China, South Africa, and Tunisia, which are countries and cases that I developed more in my thesis, has been framed by neo-colonial critique. The legacy of their complex past mirrors the challenge of their future. So this way, a comparative analysis of the context of the aesthetic production of their revolutionary art provides insight on how to think freely. In this is an artwork by artist Senzo Shabango, a South African artist, and I used his artwork for the catalog for my exhibition. Space for South Africa is not a notion or an ideology. It is a living symbol for political oppression and a physical appropriateness and segregation based on color. For most South African artists during apartheid and post-apartheid era, space is interrelated to identity. While it is difficult to own a space in Johannesburg, the artist challenges himself with an innovative method with linocut printmaking to carve out space. These are some examples of artworks of South African artists. Today, even 15 years after the end of apartheid, the legacy of trauma from the horrors of many years of radical divide is still rampant in the South African society. Violence between the blacks and the whites is still embedded in the everyday culture. This is because South Africans were never able to move beyond the haunting effect of the social implementation of the ideology that spatial segregation was legitimate based on racial superiority of the whites. South Africa's culture is stained with the debate of who is the victim and who is the perpetrator. As a scholar with a self-designed major in art and politics, I am interested to examine the artistic reactions and investigate its relationships to political phenomena, specifically in Tunisia, where a mass revolt ousted its dictator 2 years ago and brought down its regime. The case of the Tunisian Revolution provides a good example to establish the idea that when the state is going through a revolutionary period of identity and state reconstruction, the chaotic characteristic of the political order not only generates a power vacuum but also leads to social conflict, since difference becomes perceived as a threat to the right for personal freedom. I would like to talk now about the Chinese case and about specifically the authority of the image. In this slide, it's an artwork by Zhang Hongtu, and he melds with Mao's image to comment about the authority of his image and propaganda. Artistic freedom in China is an oxymoron. Chinese 20th century history shows the extent to which the government has directly and indirectly shaped the production of art and culture. The events of the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976 and the 1989 democracy movement tragedy and the opening of the market economy significantly altered the national as well as the global perception of China's artistic freedom and its cultural identity. Zhang Hongtu was born into a traditional Chinese Muslim family in 1943 in northwestern Gansu province. When Mao's atheist regime took shape, he was casted off as a minority and a rightist because of his family's religious background. Zhang Hongtu understood a central dilemma in modern Chinese culture, which is defining the appropriate limits of authority. Realizing this authority of the image, Hongtu used Mao's once glorified persona during the Cultural Revolution as an icon to make satirical critique about his daunting legacy. Most of Zhang Tu's art cannot be exhibited in China. The content of the image is another important distinction, since it only portrays political messages, framing ideas in a simple and effective way, or playing on the public's personal effects, such as evoking danger, threat by the enemy, or love and affection for the almighty Mao. This was the propaganda poster images that were striking during the Cultural Revolution. In this sense, all propaganda art images from different movements shared similar figures and archetypes. In this slide, I'm showing artist Ai Weiwei. He is purposely breaking an ancient ceramic as a way to reflect on breaking away with tradition and moving forward. This last artwork is by Zhang Hongtu as well, in which it's called The Last Banquet, and he comments about Mao's atheism and the crackdown on his people. To go back to Tunisia's ongoing revolution, I want to show a quick video of the recent events. This is in downtown Tunis 2 days ago.
لغوف لراب السلطة ملك الشعب.
السلطة ملك الشعب.
I will let it download for a while. The uprisings that escalated in the capital, Tunis, and led to the ousted of the president were embellished with a visual movement that emerged by the people's need to master the art of voicing out their dissent. The fall of the regime declared the end of censorship, which signified a remarkable phenomenon for Tunisian. In fact, people started to feel the change in their daily life and personality once they were capable of speaking freely. The revolution gave them the right to criticize and converse publicly about politics and societal problems. If you ask any Tunisian today, they will confirm that the so-called revolution has yet to prove successful in terms of socio-political change, and that it merely brought about freedom or parole libérée. Ben Ali's pictures were the only pictures allowed during his regime, and they differentiated in sizes. They were remarkably overwhelming through all the city's plazas, and not mentioning inside every store or institution. Also, slogans were only allowed for the regime's campaigns. As I explained in the Chinese case, the legacy of many years of political propaganda, images, and control has a very negative effect in the post-revolutionary political discourse. Interestingly, when Ben Ali first came to power, the inauguration of his political triumph was celebrated with slogans of democratic ideals, and now also the party of Al-Nahda is celebrated with slogans of democracy. This is a picture of the sit-in that was sent to me by one of the photographers that I also included in my exhibition. And this is just an illustration of Bilali's propaganda. The change in the city's Tunis pictorial landscape was very visible during my brief visits to Tunisia from college vacation to the other. And for example, in Sidi Bouzid's walls, there are so many calligraphies and slogans about democracy and about the end of dictatorship. What is important about the Tunisian revolution that it generated an ideological and identity cleavage between the Islamists and the secularists. And so today the problem is about who has the right to rule and who hasn't. And in many cases, during exhibitions, some Islamists went to the exhibition and tore down and vandalized artworks, saying that it does not show the Tunisian identity. Again, it is important to emphasize that the democratization process requires societal strength and unity. And with Tunisia's current political power vacuum, it requests an investigation of the role of culture and religion in rebuilding a shattered identity. This is Tunisian artist who is based in Washington, Seattle, artwork. It's called The Circus. And this is another one that is called Hidden Friends. Raja Gharbi's internal feelings as a woman are translated implicitly into her paintings, woven through the twisting and turning of her lines and colors that reminisce the geometrics of a woman's body. However, she denounces the circulating photos on social media networks of naked women in provocative poses, arguing that this undermines the totality of life that a woman is capable of. She says, in the art world, to use women's nudity as a metaphor and as a symbol of women's sexual dignity is dishonest. It is a pattern of representation that is normative. It limits the true freedom of a woman's body, which is definitely not sex or a decorative image. She then points to a great danger that falls from such practice and which, in her opinion, makes conservative people follow extremism. Even though she says we need art more than before, there has been utilitarian exploitative provocation by some artists. She says, some people would like to see Tunisia travel back centuries ago when men exploit women as well as children and nature even more than we are now. In a place where the rule of law is violent, we have to represent intelligibly, otherwise we will give Salafis more gas for their engines. I would like to show the artworks of a Tunisian artist based in Washington, D.C. His name is Lotfi Krayem, and he uses syncretic movement in his paintings. At the end, I just want to emphasize that we have to recognize culture not as a constant state of affairs, but rather as an event that sees its roots in aesthetics and establishes a potential for transformation of the self from the constant ordinary to an extraordinary self. Similarly, I think we should conceive democracy as the condition of becoming democratic, which is rooted in the cultural event. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have a first question to ask? Well, I guess I have something. Ms. Lakhdhar, you talked about the relationship between art and revolution. And I was really interested in the way that you talked about the impact of art on revolution and also the response of art to revolution. So I wonder, like, how that could possibly be applied to the Palestine situation. I don't know if you've looked into, or both of you guys can weigh in on this. Excuse me.
You want to answer first, Ikram?
Thank you for the question. I would just first like to start off by saying that during the Ben Ali regime, the only artworks that were shown was Palestinian artworks. And Tunisia was actually the only country that allowed the PLO delegation to have a siege in Tunis. Second, to comment about Palestinian art, I'm not very proficient in it, and I'm very honored to have Manal talk about her experience. But I know from an exhibition that was organized in Tunisia that was called Entitled Politics. They had a Palestinian artist, and his artwork was it showed laundry, and it showed an underwear that was that had the name Irhal on it. And so Irhal is a word that Tunisians used to have Ben Ali leave the country. And if you go back and see videos of January 14th, 2011, you will see thousands of Tunisians in Bourguiba Avenue just saying dégage, dégage, dégage. And I think that's very symbolic and significant of how art and social movements and politics are interrelated in ways that we don't actually see it.
We have a question right here. Hold on one second. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much to the Palestinian Center for another wonderful presentation. And thank you to the interns, especially because they have coordinated this event and a series of events. And thank you to the speakers. For Ikram, you know that traditionally the concept of revolution has had to do, and it still is related to, trying to get rid of inequalities and injustices in the legal, social, economic fields. My question is, in this Arab Spring, what is it? What is there any component of the main part of a revolution which is getting rid of inequalities? That's my first question. And second, for Manal, you know that in our Latin American Cultural Center in Washington in the 80s, I was the chairman for a while, and we had many concerts, huge concerts with hundreds of people every 2 weeks. And we included, of course, Latin American groups. And the only non-Latin American group that we included several times was a Palestinian group called Al-Watan. And we were proud and happy to do it. There was one Palestinian, Mutaza, who was an artist at GW. He exhibited there. And he observed, he came to each and every one of our events, like I come here to the center. And he opened up a Palestinian cultural center inspired by what he saw us doing here in Lebanon. So my question is, in the US, as far as you can tell, are there Palestinian cultural centers that promote the Palestinian culture?
And you mean generally?
As far as you know, in the city where you live, or in the US, or even in the Middle East, in other Arab countries, are there any Palestinian cultural centers that promote the Palestinian culture to keep it alive?
I'm sure I am aware of one here, and I think I think his name is Munayer, and him and his wife, they make sure that the collection of dresses of Palestinian and heritage is, I know the wife, that his wife, she made a catalog that includes all the custom of different villages in Palestine, and it's like a book to go back to for the history. And as in terms of Palestinian Cultural Center, I'm not exactly sure, but there are people who are determined and willing to keep up with the tradition and the heritage of the Palestinian.
Thank you so much for pointing out the term inequality, because a lot of times it gets lost in all the debates and talks about challenges for democracy. The only thing we don't talk about inequality that much. And I think inequality has to do a lot with, first, economically, and second, culturally. And I think I can't really talk that much about this, but I believe that the consequences of the Tunisian revolt, which we cannot talk about it as a revolution now, the consequence is showing this economic inequality in cultural means, because you see the society divided as Islamists and as secularists, but in reality, those two groups actually formed because one group has more economic means and claims to be more educated and intellectual, and the other group, who is, I'm talking about the extremists, right? I'm not saying just everybody's like that. But on the other side, the Islamists are the ones that are less privileged, less educated, and so on. And so now you see the clash between them, each trying to build a new Tunisia for themselves and claim power based on that cleavage. Thank you.
All right. Do we have another question? Let's get one over here. Thank you.
My question is for Ikram. It's great seeing you again.
Yes.
Throughout your presentation, I could see how the three areas that you chose, South Africa, China, and Tunisia, how they interrelate, although their struggles are a bit different. I'm just curious to know, how did you come to choose these areas in particular?
That's a very good question. I still can't find the answer to that. I think those places found me more than anything throughout my evolution in terms of research. I really think that in terms of the global order now, these three places are very significant. China first, because it's an emerging economy and it has a lot of weight in the international order. South Africa as well, because I think it's a very important case where color is an important issue and was the kind of the base for a lot of injustices and ongoing trauma and violence in the country. Tunisia is because it's my country first, and it started the Arab Spring, and I think in a lot of times the international focus shifts to Egypt and other countries because of interest, but I think Tunisia is more important because it's a smaller country, and I don't know, in political theory, it has all the key criteria for democracy to establish, and so I wanted to compare and analyze all these three cases to bring more questions about them, not to answer anything.
All right, Dagmar, did you have a question?
Yes, this is for Manal. I'm interested in asking you about what you think the responsibility of the individual artist has become in light of this issue of the Arab Spring. I'm looking at a lot of individual artists who are Palestinian or Egyptian, Tunisian, and they were working as artists, as you were, prior to the Arab Spring. And many of the artists were simply working within whatever realm they wanted to work in as expressing their own personal, individual ideas and using their art for that. And now, with the Arab Spring, I think that there is something of a pressure, as it were, to explore your own personal feelings through your art about that. And that may somewhat create a conflict in the type of art that you do. And I know you've been exposed to that, as you mentioned in your talk, about the fact that people are sometimes looking at things that are very personal to you and interpreting them in a perhaps more political way than you initially wanted. So if you wouldn't mind commenting on how this explosion in the Arab world has perhaps changed the kind of art that you do and this kind of statements that you want to make.
Definitely. I think as an artist, for me and for any other artist in the Arab world now, since it's a big mixed up of things now, not to be afraid of to show your ideology, whatever it is, as long as it's towards humanity, towards showing that there is more to life than killing and blood and who's winning and who's to be the most important. So I think showing emotions of you to be a real artist in your spirit and in your soul, that will show. And I don't know about the Arab Spring, if I want to still call it spring. In my opinion, just like talking about the homeless piece, or I call it sometimes homeless. It's a big loss. It's so many contradictions and so many. How am I gonna say? It's not just an abstract picture of what's going on in the Arab world. It's beyond it. It's a picture that I guess it's gonna take some time to even explain. Thank you.
This gentleman right here.
I have a question for Ikram. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the situation of artists in Tunisia right now. What I'm getting at is, I was lucky enough to spend several weeks in Tunis right on the eve of the revolution back in October, November 2010, and I got to know a number of artists. I'm an artist myself. And my sense was that artists were free to paint what they want as long as it wasn't in any way political. And
killing someone, but
right. But my sense is now, ironically after the revolution, first of all, it's a lot more difficult for a painter to make a living, just because of the overall economic stability, and I know that from friends firsthand. No one's buying paintings anymore. And the other element there is, due to, shall we say, conservative backlash, the fear of expressing what you want to express might in certain instances be even more than it was before, ironically. So maybe if you could speak to the situation of the artists in Tunisia right now and where you see that going, I'd be curious what you think.
The situation of artists now in Tunisia is extremely terrible. I say that with a lot of sadness and also a lot of optimism, but cynical. I think, to elaborate a little bit more, I agree with you. Before the revolt, art in Tunisia has never been able to be publicly free, and artists that are exposed to the outside world do not do art that is good, and that is why they are exposed. It's hard to make art when you live in a situation, when you live in a country that is oppressed. It's hard to make any art that is not seen as political, and so that's what that's where problem starts. It's like when Manal does her personal exploration and illustrates that, it gets translated politically, but she's dealing with her own world. And then after the revolt, artists thought that things are going to be changing to the better, ideals of democracy and freedom, but then the new regime used religion as a political tool, and that kind of brainwashed people more and more. And so last summer, there was an art fair in which artists exposed their recent productions, and there was a huge scandal. There was a 3-day curfew protest against this art fair, saying that the art was very blasphemous, which is not true. People that were out on the street protesting, they didn't even go visit the exhibit. They don't know, they have not seen the art, but it's just because some actors said that they were blasphemous and you have to attack these people. And so artists now in Tunisia are used as the sacrificing sheep for political games. If a party wants to, let's say, create some scandal to hide something or to say something, they use artists for that. And there has been threats to artists. Their faces, their photos have been published on Facebook and other social media, saying that these are the people that you must kill, and their blood is halal under God. And these artists now are scared. There's no sense of security at all to make art or to live, or so yeah, I think it's a very tough situation. There are some artists that are still producing art, not because they want to make a statement, but because that's the only thing they can do in this situation. If you're an artist, you make art to heal yourself, most importantly. And so they continue making art, but not to show it or to say anything to anyone else, which is sadly terrible.
I think we have time for one more question. Let's go back there. Yes.
Thank you. I actually have a question which relates to an earlier inquiry about the focus on China and Tunisia, and specifically the reference to propaganda image. And here, with all the talk about the Arab Spring and the U.S. Determination to democratize our homeland, I see propaganda images every day. I pick up the Washington Post. So what we saw, in these images are not specific to China or to Tunis. And in relation to Tunis, I'm certainly no fan of Ben Ali or Mubarak for that matter, but I have seen pamphlets prepared by the Tunisian unions during the time of Ben Ali, which were explicitly political. It's true that many of these people had been imprisoned and they were under surveillance and so on, but this kind of art did exist. So it didn't, the so-called Arab Spring and the so-called Arab Revolution, which I certainly beg to differ about identifying it as such, wasn't the beginning of the expression of politics in art. In fact, it was interesting to hear the two presenters, Ms. Diab, saying that she chose a concentration in the politics of art at her school, and Ms. Lakhdhar saying that she had a self-designed concentration in art. Okay, so it means that even, whether at the academic level or just in the ordinary world, there is now, sometimes we have a tendency to feel that we have to make explicit the political dimension, when actually art, politics in art, I look at the ancient I'm Egyptian myself, I look at ancient Egyptian art, and it's very explicitly political by both the producer and the recipient. So I think, when we talk about, our politics, defined very broadly in terms of power relations, is integral to every aspect of our life. And so it doesn't surprise me that finally there is a recognition of that. There was a statement made, and which kind of took me by surprise by Ms. Diab, when you talked about older Palestinians sharing, of course, with younger Palestinians this longing for Palestine, and by the way, it's not only Palestinian. For us as Arabs, the central issue in terms of our political struggles for a very long time has been Palestine, and I'm very much against, this kind of atomization of political struggles. The Palestinian struggle is part of our greater struggle against imperialism and, of course, Zionism. But Ms. El-Deeb, talked about older people being inarticulate in the expression, of their imagery of Palestine or longing about Palestine, while younger people are more informed. And I don't know where that is coming from. So I hope that I'm not reading too much in it, but maybe you can give us some clarification as to why you make that statement.
Well,
thank you.
I'll be happy to answer that. Being inarticulate, old and young, it's just talking about how the older people have been waiting for the moment to happen. It's, generation passed and generations, but the hope's still there. So basically, the older generation give it to the younger generation, and we are still looking forward to that. And I think it's going to happen someday.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Well, there is a generational difference, and that's in the Quran, it's in the Bible, that, the older generations have been a little bit backward, and the new generation is more progressive and more loving. So I agree with those ladies.
How do you think that the younger generation is able to progress
They are
from the work
definitely
that the
much
older
more
generation
educated
has
than
done?
any generation.
We're actually sort of running out of time. Sorry to cut it off. We would be really happy to continue the discussion with all of you guys in the lobby. So thank you so much to our online viewers, and thank you so much to both of our speakers. It was such a great event.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you next time.